Welcome, everyone. I'm Joe Tarnowski with ECRM, and I want to thank you all for joining us. During today's webcast, you're going to learn all of the steps that you need to take to find the right contract manufacturer for fast and scalable growth, whether it's for your next product line extension or for creating a new private label or white label product. Our presenter is Emily Page, CEO of Pearl Resourcing, and an expert on taking ideas and turning them into products that can be sold at retail. And she doesn't just talk the talk. She's walked countless factory floors, worn the hair nets as she tests out products. She's conducted food safety quality control and loves to just roll up her sleeves and dig into every aspect of product development. She's helped commercialize, launch, and grow the sales of hundreds of brands in e commerce and brick and mortar retail, specializing in sales, product development, brand packaging, and scaling. And she also helps brands prepare their pitches for ECRM sessions. So, Emily is also a regular contributor of thought leadership and best practices content to ECRM and RANGME. And we're thrilled to be teaming up with her on this webcast. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. There will be a live Q&A following Emily's presentation. So for that, to submit your questions, use the questions tab at the bottom of your screen, right? So you have the questions, you have the polls, and you have the chat. Definitely do not use the chat for your Q&A questions. So Emily likes to go back and forth with the audience, and that communication should all be done through the chat. I see some of you using it right now. Hello. But for the questions that you want at the end of the presentation, use the questions box. So that's the box that I'll be looking in. If you put them in the chat, they're going to get buried. This webcast will be recorded. So we'll send out the link to the recording to everybody afterwards so that you can either watch it again or share it with your colleagues. Finally, just a heads up that ECRM offers 2 annual sessions focused on providing resources to brands that need assistance with product development, manufacturing, primary and secondary packaging, raw ingredients, logistics, and related services. And there's no cost for brands to participate in these virtual sessions. So if you're a contract manufacturer looking to meet with brands or a brand that needs these resources, contact Michael Castillo at 440-528-0441. We're going to have his information in the chat as well, so you don't have to remember that phone number. So now I'm going to be jumping off the screen during the presentation, but I will be back when it wraps up to moderate the live Q&A. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome Emily Page. Emily, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Joe. I always love having you here because you are a great person to introduce me. And this webinar is so exciting because it's a topic I've been passionate about and I have years of experience. As Joe said, I literally have worn hairnets and raced, sweating through a factory, helping Target to launch 18 different products. And I've sent samples and commercialized recipes for Trader Joe's. I've done the entire thing. I've even owned my own brand, Jocko White Tea, with a partner of mine. And we actually launched that from zero, just an idea, just a gleam in someone's eye, all the way to something that was selling for millions of dollars in retail. We used ECRM, believe it or not, to actually find those retailers. So today, what I'm going to talk about is actually based on the blood, sweat, and tears of years of experience. And I hope it's going to help you to make more profit and have more fun while sourcing. Today's title is How to Find a Factory for Your Brand's Next Product Line Extension. And I want to talk about why you should have a product line extension. The first thing is that it takes so much money to grow your business. And once you have acquired that customer, you want to continue to sell them products. It's 5 times more expensive to get a new customer than it is to sell a product to an existing customer. So whether you have an e-commerce brand or you're selling in retail, if anyone has brand recognition of your company, you are going to have an easier time selling to them a second, third, and fourth product. That increases the customer lifetime value, meaning the money that you can generate from them, the profit that you can acquire, and it reduces the costs that you pay annually just to acquire a new customer base. And of course, in e-commerce, there's a concept of incrementality. You want to have someone at checkout buying not one item, but 2, 3, 4, because the shipping costs to get them that product actually are usually sort of fixed. There's the cost of freight, there's the labor to pack an order, and the more items inside that box, the better your profit. And in the retail space, the positive thing is being able to have larger real estate. So imagine you walk into a store and you only see one product. It doesn't stand out compared to having an entire wall that's dedicated to various flavors of your brand. And statistically, it's shown that the human eye is more attracted when there's larger spaces of color. You will have more power to sell in stores. So this is in your best interest. I'd love to see if anyone out there has experienced that. If you've launched a new product and seen both profits increase, revenue increase, maybe costs go down, and also incrementality, meaning in e-commerce or more sales in retail. If you have experienced this, please add this to the chat because I'd love to hear your experience. The conclusion is you should do a product line extension. It will benefit your long-term value of your company. And I want to also talk about what is a contract manufacturer, so we're all on the same page. Don't check out when you see this. I know you're probably like, I know what a contract manufacturer is. I know. We have to go back to this basics before I teach you and explain how to powerfully communicate with them so that you can get what you need. We need to refresh who they are and what their objective is. A contract manufacturer or co-man is a factory whose singular job is to make more and more money, a profitable product, through mass production, producing something many, many times over. So their goal is constantly to reduce costs, to systemize, to reduce creativity, to minimize costs per unit. That's their objective. That's why they exist and how they can help you. That is the reason why you want to contact them. They have category expertise, okay? Category expertise. I'm gonna stop sharing this PDF real quick just because I want you to see my face and my enthusiasm. They have category expertise, which allows them to stay focused on things like regulations, expenses that are changing in the commodity space. They're able to have relationships with vendors that perhaps you don't have. So you get to use their machinery, their trained staff, their category expertise to your profitable advantage. I also want to point out that they have massive capital expenses. That is why you want to work with them, because you don't want to go buy machinery to have to manufacture your supplements or your beauty products. You want to use theirs. Oops. You also want your staff. You don't have staff, regular payroll for the products. You want to focus on selling your brand, selling to customers, developing relationships. And a co-packer is a person who usually repacks existing items. So you will sometimes see people use these words interchangeably: contract manufacturer, co-packer, co-man, co-packaging manufacturer. You also need to know the definition of a private label product versus a white label product. A white label product is a product that is already being manufactured by that factory that they allow you to put new and fresh packaging artwork on. Private label means that factory already has category expertise, so they're already manufacturing the type of product that you want, but they're willing to make some adjustments. That could include packaging, ingredients, method of packing, the style of the way that it's presented. So they're willing to make some adjustments. So we need to get that fresh in our head. Who they are, how they make money is economies of scale. They are committed very heavily in capital, meaning when they are not working, they are losing massive amounts of money. I just want you to let it sink in, because in business is about partnerships. So we need to talk about we need to understand our partner in order to help them so that we can all work together better. So I'm going to put another question in the chat, and this is one of the next things that we're going to get to. So I can help you find them. I'm going to first go over all of the problems in sourcing. So here we go again, share this PDF. So I would love to hear from you what your biggest pain points are when searching for a contract manufacturer or sourcing. I'm going to tell you what the 4 ones I hear most often as an executive coach for CPG brands and as a packaging design owner. For Pearl Resourcing, I experience these problems constantly. So these are the 4 ones I always hear. But if you have a pain point that you're here to solve, I want to see it here in the chat. Here are the 4 that I've experienced, and on this webinar, we will answer them. The first one being related to the title of this webinar. It's hard to find the people you're looking for to manufacture your product. They don't usually reply, or if they do reply, it's inconsistent. You can get super far down the line manufacturing with them and then suddenly realize, oh my gosh, you've wasted so much time of mine and you're literally not going to manufacture my product for me, or you can't do it the way that I want. And then of course, number 4, the finished product sometimes is not exactly what you had in mind. So we will go over all 4 of these things to find these solutions for you. If you're in this webinar, I'd like to see what you want to point out. I do see MOQ and price, and so we will add that to the Q&A and we'll address that in the next set of conversation. So in order to help our customer base succeed, I want to again come back to knowing our partner. We as entrepreneurs or as business owners or as executives must realize that sales is actually not just to our customers, but it's also to our vendors and our employees. We have to sell up and down the product life cycle. We are constantly influencing people. That skill you have to sell your product is the same skill we're going to tap into right now to finding a factory and helping them to see the benefit of working with us, even at lower minimum order quantities, even at lower prices. Jessica and Jody, I hope you heard that. It's essential that we develop a sales perspective to be able to help them find the benefit in doing the things that benefit us, right? So we need to dig into what's their perspective. And when you understand that, you'll be able to sell to the factory more effectively so that they are on your side because you have been on theirs. And so the next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to address each of these pain points. It's hard to sell to them. And I want to tell you why we're getting in their head, because this will make you better at solving problems for them. So I just showed that to you, and I'm going to just close X out of it so we can talk face to face. I find that more fun. I want to be sure you can see my enthusiasm. But the first piece being is they are super busy, my dudes. They are super busy being experts at what they do, and they usually are not good at sales because they're good at shrinking things down, getting minute, getting into routine. You, a brand owner, are all about relationships and outward sales, coming up with cool branding, finding new ways to connect. You guys are outward looking and they are inward looking. It's the nature of a contract manufacturer. That's how it goes. Number 2, they really don't want to be found by inexperienced people. They don't. They are not like a brand who wants to be found by everybody. They want to be found by experts because they get a ton of emails, mostly from people who want them to do something custom, at their minimum order quantity. And it's going to be a ton of work to be able to get prepared to manufacture for them. And I will tell you, they don't usually make profit on that first run. If they were to truly look at give you a competitive cost, most factories are not making wild profit off of your first order. Instead, they're hoping your second, third, and fourth order will be where they end up making profit in the long run. So it's an investment in the beginning. Most leads are not profitable. Those are the 2 reasons why you can't find them. So what is my solution for you? I've got a good one, so you're totally in luck. The solution is that you need to go where they expect to find professional customers. So you need to know where they want to hang out to find their business. Where do they want to find experts? They are going to go to industry-related places where larger brands or brands that will fit their MOQ will be hanging out. And that's the first piece. Start thinking about where do they hang out to find their ideal customer. And number two, you can contact experts who already have these relationships because they can give you introductions. And so when I say that, there are a ton of resources, and I'm going to give you 11 of them. So I hope you are prepared. And then I will share the screen and give you the actual links. The first place to check is Google search, which everyone does. It's not the best place, but it is the first place most people go. You can type in the words manufacturer, private label, contract manufacturer, co-man, co-pack, co-packer. And another thing I've used that really works well is usually co-packer directory. So you can find an online place where people just for the sake of it, for the hell of it, they list co-packers that are in your category. And it's surprising, but that's easier to find a potential co-packer than just looking for one independently. That's how I have effectively found a ton of people. The second thing is trade organizations. So places where they are all hanging out. And I can think immediately in the candy category of like the Retail Confectioners International. It's actually a nonprofit where everyone goes to get education if they like candy and they manufacture it. So in those places, there's just lists and lists of people who are commenting, interacting, writing newsletters. So you can go to that website and just search really quickly for someone who's making chocolate and contact them. They may not have figured out how to create a private label website for their page to make it easy to search for them, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't be open to it. There's also public lists. So you can go to Thomasnet, MFG.com, Makers Row. These are, or the Private Label Manufacturers Association, PLMA.com. That is a company. These are all companies that just amalgamate and create connections for factories. There's super nerdy factual lists, but it's available online at a library. You can get a hold of it. You can also buy lists. So there's companies that sell these lists and offer them. I've never done it myself, so I don't know how active those lists are, but it makes sense to me that it's easy to crawl the internet and to create a list that would be worthwhile purchasing. You can also go to FDA.gov. It's crazy. A lot of organizations are already listed on that website because they have to participate in they have to participate with the FDA. So you can actually search on the FDA website for registered companies. So it's called Search Registration and Listing on the FDA.gov website. There's also, for the USDA, any products made with meat, those products have a bug number or a certification number, and you can actually go to the USDA website and say, who manufactured this product, which is one that's maybe a competitor. You can also look up recalls. And I know you're probably like, ew, Emily, I don't want to work with a company that's ever had a recall. I have talked to multiple food scientists and people who are responsible for QA who are massive experts. And they say when someone has gone through a recall, that will usually be the safest factory to work with because they had to get their stuff right in order to get back into business. And they will usually be desperate for business. So you can actually find a factory that's gone through a recall and it's super searchable online. Packaging companies sell locally to factories nearby. So you can call some packaging factory that you're working with already and ask them if they know of anyone locally. And I found tons of companies just through that referral system. You can also hire consultants like me who have done this type of work in every category across the gamut. There's a million consultants out there. And if they have done this work, they can help you to find the right factory. And then lastly, retired CPG experts, those people who have built a brand, sold it, are in masterminds and they're in groups and they have resources to give you advice. And of course, the other thing that you can do is go to a trade show. Trade shows where people expect to find people that they can work with are really helpful. So ECRM, which is not sponsoring this, I'm just promoting them because I sincerely have gotten value from ECRM and RANGME as a person who has owned brands. And so I do education for free to ECRM. They have these upcoming events. And if you have a brand, you are actually allowed to go for free. So if you're trying to find a supplement or OTC product or a beauty, skincare, personal care product, you're allowed to go for free to this virtual session, and factories who really want to be found are already going to be attending and shopping their wares. So you can go search for that. This is Michael, who Joe mentioned earlier, but that's a great resource too. And if you go to any trade show, really, like if you don't go to just a private label one, sometimes you can, anyone you meet will sometimes have a private label program. You just ask them. So there's the private label, PLMA is a exclusive private label manufacturing trade show. You can go to that. It's in Chicago every year, and you got to pay a lot of money to go, but everyone you know is there specifically to do private labeling. If you go to the Fancy Food Show or any other trade show, you will be able to ask anyone if they own their factory and if they do private label. It's there for you as a resource. Marco just said some of those directories look shady. I totally would agree with you. And so I'm not necessarily recommending to buy lists. It's, you got to vet the list. So I'm not vetting for all of them. I think the easiest things to do is to go to trade shows or to find lists where people are already promoting themselves. They want to be found in that space because it's only for experts. So the second, is there any other questions on that topic of sourcing and like trying to find people? I want to make sure you guys have that. If there's a list that I mentioned that you want to have access to, you can feel free to email me or put them in the questions. And I'll get back to you with the exact list. And I'll put these links also in the chat for anybody who wants to attend, as well as my LinkedIn and Joe Tarnowski's LinkedIn, in case you guys want to connect to us later. Here it is. Okay. Second pain point, people don't usually reply or reply consistently. If you have had this pain point, raise your hand in the chat, because I would love to know if you also feel it's really hard to get a hold of people. And here's the reason why. We're getting in their head so we can help them help us. First of all, they are busy with existing customers that are bigger than you. We defined the fact that they are in this business to do mass production, not small production, mass production. The bigger the client, the more they need to focus on that person because it keeps their lights on. That's the first reason why they're not replying to you, is you don't look big enough. The second thing is your business does not appear that it will bring in the profit in the short run. Okay. I do consulting and people get on these phone calls with me sometimes and say, I can't get a hold of a factory. And I'm not mocking them. I have also said this, but I'm telling you, it's usually because of the way that someone has written the email or contacted them or communicated that reduces the probability someone will reply. They write a romantic story about how they started their business to save their cat, and their cat needed this food, and the world needs better food for cats. Boring email, unprofessional. I wouldn't reply to them either. The other reason why they maybe aren't replying is that, these are duplicates. They have low staff. They usually are not sales focused as much. And so that's your benefit. It's to your benefit that they have less staff. They're not going to charge you as much, but you should just keep it in mind. That's what your job is as a brand owner. Your job is to do sales. They're not that good at it. So use that to your advantage. That's the reason why they don't have their own brand and why they're open to working with you, is because they're not so good at the sales stuff. So let's enjoy and appreciate that little weird quirk about them and create a better solution. The first and most powerful solution, which I will literally teach you today, is professionalized communication. If you professionalize how you are corresponding with people, using the keywords that they are looking for, you will get a better reply. And if you don't believe me and if you think I'm talking trash, just think about if you applied for a job. If your past experience has been being a secretary and you apply for a CEO job and someone reads the vocabulary, the content of your resume, within just one resume, one quick glance, I can tell you whether or not that person is remotely a candidate or not. And I'm only going to reply to the people who look like viable candidates. I may not even take the time to reply to the people who applied who were not a good fit because it would take too much time. You will increase the chances that a factory will reply to you when you're sending a request for a quote when you professionalize your communication. And I will show you how. The second thing is you need to focus on their benefit. Don't tell me why you need a quote. I don't care. Think about it from their perspective. If I was them, I don't care. I care about making profit and paying my employees. So write this email with my needs in mind. How will you help me with my needs? Make it short and sweet. Continue to politely and in normal intervals email and call them. You have to schedule it and you have to treat it the same way you would treat contacting a retailer. It's not personal. They didn't reply. It's not personal. It hurts. It's annoying, especially after like so many emails and so many phone calls. But I've contacted a factory and then 3 months later contacted them again, and they finally responded because they had a seasonal influx of a very large customer and they were ready to work with me. So schedule it, treat it like it's a job. Find someone who can give you a direct contact who's outside of the sales receptionist position. If you know someone who can vouch for you, they can give you direct contact. That's a fast way to get a reply. Expect to pay for samples. Offer to pay for samples. Help them solve problems. Make it super clear that you understand their business and you are willing to pay fairly for the things that they will do to help you. Source and prepare samples in advance. This is a crazy one most people don't think about, but a factory, if you say, oh, I want to make a brand new cookie, but with cinnamon and spice, which is something you don't do you know what that company has to do? A staff member has to take time and source through costs as well as samples of multiple different vendors who supply cinnamon. They don't know the cost of it if they don't currently import it. They don't know that type of packaging that you want to use. So if you are proposing something they don't already exactly do turnkey, your request will take a lot of time from them. And you know what? You have an abundance of time. If you don't have an abundance of money, you have abundance of time. Go contact other vendors, find the pricing, find the ingredients, name the brand, and send that information after your first few correspondence. So that way you've just made their lives really easy. They can very easily plug in your sourcing costs into their little calculator and quickly give you an estimate. Bam, man, that right there is worth money in the bank. You're welcome. All of you are welcome. And this is the big warning, and don't talk about your story. Don't talk about your product unless it's to help convince the factory that you're a worthwhile candidate to work with. We got to watch ourselves because it's so tempting to be so in love with ourselves and our company and try to get everyone excited. People are excited about working with us once they realize it's going to benefit them too. We're all like that. No judgment here. So here's an example of ideal communication with a co-packer. So if you want to reply, you need to sound like a legit customer. Clear, short, focused on their worries, not yours. How do you do that? Number one, brainstorm and write a RFQ list beforehand. What things would they potentially be needing to know in order to give you a good estimate? Write a brief email with this list at the bottom of it. Include proof that you're a good customer. So something about your brand, your customer base, years in business, SKUs currently sold. So you're proving proof of concept, proof that you have revenue, proof that you can sell through, proof that you will be a person who once you sell it once, you'll be able to sell it again. So here is your RFQ list. I'm starting you off. You want to think of the imaginary information of the product in mind. So what is this product? Is it white label or private label? Is there unique product specifications? Like we're going to make peanut butter, but we're going to put it in a tube. So what is unique compared to other things in the industry that you need to make sure that they're capable of manufacturing? What's the volume, the weight, the piece size, the serving size of this? What about the packaging, the cell unit, the secondary unit? So cell unit would be maybe the thing that is like a pouch that you sell, stand-up pouch. And then the secondary unit would be a stand-up case, a point of purchase display. Define the packaging. Are there any special features? So like it's gluten-free, certified organic, kosher. The expected order quantity that I recommend, you talk about what it will be on the first order and about subsequent orders, and give some type of proof of concept like, hey, we want to order quarterly at your minimum order quantity, but the good news is that will total 4 times your MOQ. the target MSRP so they understand the general pricing. And if you feel uncomfortable doing that because you want the best price, you can explain, I want a cheap product. I want a premium product. I need something to be under $10 when I sell it in retail, because the manufacturer will be able to know generally what pricing needs to happen in order for that to be possible. We'll start you off on the right foot. Any pictures of the product or packaging that you have from a licensed food scientist who helped you commercialize the recipe, or your recipe from home, or even competitor products that you really admire that you want them to replicate. And then, of course, the target launch date. When you brainstorm, you write a bunch of information. Then you synthesize it into a short, lovely list for your co-packer. And then you write an email like this. The subject is request for quote or request for proposal, the product type, the brand. And then in the body, you write something quick that explains you're worth talking to. You say, I am interested in getting a quote for a project. We're launching in this time. Below is an RFQ explaining the project. Can you review and let me know if you have time for a phone call on this explicit date? And then below it, you put the list, a bulleted list of the basic facts. You don't have to disclose anything until you have an NDA, but you obviously want to work with a factory that's already doing what you want to do. So there's nothing you're going to say to them that they're going to be like, oh, wow, I never thought about making a vitamin, out of dog meat. There's nothing you're going to come up with that a factory will want to do for you that they're not kind of already doing. So you don't have to be afraid that you're disclosing your secret to them, because the hardest part is usually selling a product. That's truly one of the hardest pieces about building a brand, which is why they're not doing it. They're focusing on manufacturing. Was that helpful? Was that little short email helpful? I'd love to see if you had an aha moment, if that gave you any answers that you maybe hadn't thought of. I also have a really long list of questions that you could ask your contract manufacturer, but I don't want this to go too long. So if you want more questions that you think you should ask, I will send them out in the email afterwards. Let me know if you'd like to see those questions. So let's go on to the next pain point, which is pain point number 3. You're late in the game. You realize that the factory cannot do what you're looking for. And I'm going to tell you why so that we can fix it. Number one reason why you ended up late in the game, now you realize that they are not going to be able to manufacture for you, is because of a lack of clarity on your own part. We have to take accountability for these things, because I can't control the factory. I can only control my own communication and expectations. And even though you may have been clear, you may not have been able to ask the right questions to understand the bridge between your product and theirs. I'm not saying this is always the problem. It's not always your fault, but this is the number one reason why most contract manufacturers end up farther down the line and realizing they cannot communicate with or manufacture for someone. The second thing is unrealistic expectations of perfection on the first batch, and whether your expectations suddenly creates a lot of work for someone who's not going to make profit off of that crazy or wonderful expectation. And so they decide they can't work with you. I've seen it happen many times. The third reason is a lack of preventative and reasonable communication upfront. So as we are doing things, there's a professional way in which we document every single iteration of our product to make sure that we have a standard. So I'm going to show you how to address all 3 of these things. Okay, there we go. So the first thing you can do to solve this is create a thorough product specification sheet up front. This is a document I'm going to show you how to do. We go regularly updating and building a product spec sheet, which is the Bible standard for a manufacturer as well as yourself on what you're manufacturing. What does a successful product look like? The second thing is really check and test samples. So many people I've worked with as a consultant, we have sent them many samples. We've warned them to check things. We've sent them production proofs. We forced them to sign sign documents saying that they have manufactured things. I've done this as a consultant with people and begged them to check stuff, and they didn't. They lied about checking samples, or they checked it quickly, like, oh yeah, it looks good. They didn't proof it. Or maybe they're a personality who doesn't like doing details, so they forget to ask somebody else to take a look at the thing because they're in a rush. You have to check the samples. This is your line of defense to communicate with a factory and set a new standard. Number 3, create smaller preliminary batches. It's so tempting because you've got 1 million customers out there to do a huge production run. You need to make smaller batches because things go wrong on the first batch that you won't realize until you do the second one. And lastly, save test samples from every batch and label them, and get as many of them as you can, because it will help you to go back and see, where did this go wrong, and to be able to communicate with people in the future. I'm so glad I did this recently, because I had the samples. I was able to confirm that the mass production sample actually matched the pre-production samples. And so I was able to get out of a conflict with someone because they had approved a mistake that was their fault from the very beginning, and not my job to check. So you need to do this for yourself to protect your relationship with your factory. Oh yeah. Okay, so so I'm going to go through in this next section and answer ways to do all of this. But if this is something that you are interested in or have confusion about, is how do I make sure I do this, please let me know in the chat and put it as a question. So the next thing we will share is the fourth pain point that people have, and that's that hold on, sorry, the slide back and forth slide thing is throwing me off. The fourth pain point is that the finished product isn't what you wanted. So the reason why is because when you manufacture something, there is an economy of scale that happens, or a scaling process. So the recipe that you actually make, if you make homemade cookies in your own home, 1 batch, 1 dozen. If you, in your own kitchen by yourself, started making hundreds of thousands in a very large vat, what's really weird is that the recipe will change. I don't know whether it's just because it's a bigger bowl, but the ability to stir things. You have to scale things for mass production. So you sometimes cannot know how it will work in a bigger setting until you start doing it. That's point number 1. The other reason why is because there are variances among brands, ingredients. Did you know that? I once worked on a project that involved pomegranate syrup. We made samples with 1 syrup. They couldn't get it. The factory didn't tell me. They got a different syrup, and it had a different acidity, a different sweetness, and the same caloric level, but it changed things. Or another example, I worked with a company who was doing zucchini sauce, and they were using non-frozen IQF vegetables to make the samples, and then they used frozen ones afterwards, which had more water. So variances among brands or ingredients are normal. Between 2 brands making pomegranate syrup, between 2 batches of zucchini from different seasons, between a frozen and a non-frozen product, a dried versus a cooked versus a raw thing. They are going to be very different, and it's unavoidable. It's not the factory's fault. It's our job to try to protect against that, and I'll show you how. Another thing is undisclosed vendor supply changes. So some factories, they literally use the same ingredient, but someone else on the vendor side made a change. I recently was talking to a chocolate consulting client, and someone had changed the cookies to a gluten-free cookie that tasted the same, but they never made a large batch, and it resulted in a weird appearance of oil on the surface of this candy. And they didn't realize it, that the vendor had made these changes. So you have to double check this stuff. The other thing is iterating is essential. So a factory will need to do 1 batch to figure out how to do it, and then they will do it better each time. That's the nature of manufacturing. So you have to adjust your expectations in order to be able to communicate fairly with a factory and get them to feel understood and ready to help you. The last thing is unclear standards. So you might want X, and you might think you're super clear on it, but if they don't understand X and they think it's Y, we need to do something to clarify those standards. So the good news is we have a solution here, people. I'm going to share this PDF. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So the solutions are reasonable expectations of factory. We're going to ask them questions up front. What expected spoilage allowances do we have? What is the process to iterate towards perfection? You got to ask them up front. Most factories have between 5 and 10% spoilage. And the better the factory is, or the longer they've manufactured something, the more that 5 to 10% spoilage reduces. You order 10,000 units, this factory already knows that 10% of those things are going to be crap. Or they already know that the first batch is going to be 50% not the same, a perfect match. I've literally had this together with Target when we did those 18 SKUs. There was one product that the first batch, the first full day of production was crap, and they still sold it anyway in Target. But they realized that the next subsequent ones needed to be improved. It was the nature of the beast. You have to ask your factory what expectations are fair to have. Number 2, specified brand ingredients. You go find that ingredient. You find that vendor. You own your product, and you will get better results. Call the vendor. Ask the factory. So which vendor are you using? What brand are you using of flour? What brand are you using of whatever? Sometimes they won't disclose that to you. And when you're a beginner, you've never placed an order with them, or you're ordering very small, you don't want to be a pain in their butt, or they won't reply to you. They'll fire you as a client. But you can ask that especially if it's in a special ingredient, or you really are at the end, right about to place an order, and you're making your product spec sheet, you can request, can I get a COA, a certificate of analysis, or a product spec sheet on this ingredient that we're doing? And then you ask them, are the benchtop samples we made the same as did they use the same ingredients as the one we're doing for mass production? You're the second level of defense. You can't just rely on your factory to care about this stuff. It's very hard. I've worked with companies that are $0 in revenue to companies that are doing millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. They all have this problem. It's very hard to scale stuff and still be accurate. So you get to help them. Another solution is creating a QA plan. And I'm going to tell you the QA plan I recommend for you. And this is not even the most comprehensive one. I'm not a QA expert, but I've done this a lot. So these are my QA standards that are benchmarks. I'll show you those in the next slide. You want to create a product specification sheet, which I specified before. I'll show you again what should be on that. And then you need to create contracts and agreements with the factory that specify what these expectations are. Where is the margin of error that's allowable, and where do they actually fail? And what happens when they fail? So let's go into some of these. This is me, ding, ding, at NorCal Beverage, which is a canned beverage manufacturing company, making Jocko White tea, which is the brand that I was a co-owner on. Wearing the cool hairnet, people. I just wanted to prove that I've done this. So your QA plan should be written down, and you have to force yourself to check this, because you're going to want to rush. Everyone wants to rush and not do this stuff because it's awful and it slows you down. Product specification sheet, which is in a folder, a PDF, like a document. You got to have it, and you got to build it, and you got to work in it. A preliminary recipe, which is the one that you started with. Then you have a commercialized recipe, which is batched up for larger mass production. You got to keep these things in your files, especially if you own the recipe. A benchtop sample, which is one made with ingredients to build a price at your factory, but it's made in a lab. Then you have to do shelf life and lab testing just to make sure that those things are going to last for a long time and deliver on what you're promising. Doing a line trial or a sample run, which is a smaller mass production run. Everyone orders the ingredients, they test things out, you get a bunch of samples, they're going to be a little wonky, you can give them away for free, or you can eat them yourself at home. But making time and space in your budget for this will save you stress in the long run. Attend the mass production. Some people won't want you to do that. Most factories won't want you, especially because they have PTSD from really annoying brand owners who come in, take pictures, get in the way, ask questions, have unreasonable standards. So this is hard to have happen. You have to build a relationship of trust with them and establish protocol. But you should be begging, requesting, and insisting on this, and you should be well behaved at the factory, respecting them, treating them like a partner. Beg for it. Try to make that happen. If you're too small and they refuse, at least ensure that there are samples sitting there next to their mass production that were from the benchtop. You must have enough samples to taste and compare. And you also need that spec sheet, that product specification sheet there, which has documentation of what the standards are. You cannot expect them to meet your criteria if you have not written it out and been very, very clear, providing a standard. What is the Bible for your brand product? And lastly, a mass production, after it's been mass produced, you need to take lots. So you take or samples from the lots. So if you're producing all day long, there might be 3 shifts, or there might be within one shift, there might be 3 batches. Each batch, a factory is already doing this. Any good worth their salt factory is already marking the lot, meaning the batch and the date. So they'll say, oh, we already know there's 100 cases that were made today, and then another 100 cases that were made, in the afternoon. Take a sample of each of those, because every time they do a batch of something, there is expected to be variances and changes. And keep them at home. Taste test a sample from every lot. This will save you millions of dollars. I'm telling you, as you continue to scale and grow, which I totally believe is going to happen, you will benefit from that. A product spec sheet should include the product name, the recipe, the ingredients, product photos from all angles, the front, the back, the side, dimensions. I recently worked with a protein bar guy, and he found that the samples he received, the mass production ones were so much smaller, and it made him so angry. Same net weight, different shape. He never told the factory it had to be that exact shape. They were delivering on net weight and ingredients. So write those types of things down. Packaging photos from all angles. Double check any type of requirements that you have that are special. And especially, this is a pro tip, take photos of things that are unacceptable. Consider not just what it should be, but what should it not be? When is something going to be rejected? And discuss this with your factory. Make sure that they agree to those things. I did that once with a factory. We were manufacturing mugs, and they kept breaking. And we said, they cannot be breaking anymore. Like, we need a lower error tolerance. And they said, sure, we'll just charge you more money, and we will give you less breakage, and we will then guarantee it. I didn't want to, I had to negotiate that little, the nuances of that. Contracts and agreements. Everyone signs an NDA, obviously. Place a purchase order with clear specifications of your item number, the product name, UPC code, the quantity. I see people slap together POs as if it's nothing, but that's the one document. You have your accounting department, you have your procurement department at a factory, you have your salesperson who you've been talking to, you have your manufacturer. None of these people have all been on the calls talking to you. So the documents that you're creating are creating a paper trail to help a person who's sitting in front of the desk know what things are required to fulfill your order. So get that stuff super clear. Maybe even include the product spec sheet with the PO. That's probably really smart. Some type of a contract or operating agreement. Usually the factory provides this to you, but read it. Negotiate on some of the pieces. Don't be annoying, have fair expectations, but sometimes they will allow you to disagree or change pieces of it. Liability insurance. Every factory has liability insurance. You get to be added to it. You should ask to be added to it and ask for a copy of it just to understand what they're expecting to cover you if there's ever a recall. And you should have your own recall or liability insurance and make sure that you're completely covered. You're aware of any kind of risks. So those are my secret tips to sourcing a factory for a product line extension and making sure that they are going to reply to you. The conclusion of these is that you need to professionalize your process. Know where they're hanging out and go there to find them. Professionalize your communication with them. Think through everything up front and ask tons of questions so that way you're clear before you get to the end of everything and not surprised. And create these QA safeguards in your processes so that you are not putting yourself at risk. So as I'm finishing here, I'm also have put in the chat, I'm going to put in the chat the link to these events in case you're interested in signing up for one of them. Oops. And of course, I'm also putting in a link to my website. You can connect to me on LinkedIn. I would love to be friends with you. And I would also love to, if you want to work with me, so Pearl Resourcing is my packaging and branding company. We do everything from website design, Amazon page design. This is Tuka Oksanen, my partner, who does the Amazon based stuff, and we can help you. You can schedule a free 30-minute phone call on pearlresourcing.net to talk about brand and packaging design. If you want a consultant to talk through issues of sourcing, developing and product and commercializing it, you can go to emilyannpage.com, where I also offer CPG executive coaching. And I'm gonna put all those things in the link in the chat, and then we're gonna get into some questions. So what questions do we have, everybody?
Cool. We have a few, and I just want to throw out there a little plug for you, Emily. Emily's also, as I mentioned briefly in the intro, she's worked really closely with a lot of our CPG customers and prepared them to do their pitches, whether it's with retailers or with,
Yes,
um,
true.
others, and she's definitely helped them succeed. A lot of them have gotten into retail from their meetings that she's either done with them or at least coached them up on. So if that's something where you need a little help in, definitely reach out to Emily for that. So we have a few questions, and just want to remind everybody that if you have any other questions, just put them in the questions box. First question is actually from me, Emily. Um, and the answer is probably a complete other webcast topic, but once you land a contract manufacturer, how do you grow that relationship? Like, is it beneficial once you land one to stick with that one and then kind of grow together? Or, when is it right to look for another one? How often does that happen?
Joe, this is actually a mind exploding question
See,
because,
told you.
yeah, see, this is why Joe, that's why we're friends. You've always got good ideas. Here is a warning story. I have seen people who are manufacturing at a factory and they didn't like the cost. They wanted to be cheaper. So they decided to go and find a different factory, and they got a quote and an estimate, and then they pulled the order and set up, you have to produce everything every 6 months to have like inventory. So they just stopped ordering at the other factory and then started placing their order at a different one. And you know what happened? The factory couldn't produce it. It was
Hmm.
crap, total crap, 100% noticeable difference, only to save something like 50 cents. It was like 47 cents or something per unit, which can be a lot on like a $2 product. It's a lot of money. But they ended up not having inventory on that product and lost millions. Imagine that nightmare.
Yeah.
Imagine. So a cautionary tale is not to say you must stay with every factory, but you need to look at it like a partnership. Why? They did so much work up front to work with you. Your order, I paid $50,000 for this order. That's a lot of money. It's not a lot of money for them. That's probably the amount of money they have to pay on a weekly, bi-weekly, maybe monthly opportunity. They had to pay most of that to the cost of goods of just buying the ingredients for your product. So perspective is everything. Ask yourself the question, why am I trying to leave? What is the risk as well as the reward? And see, whenever possible, if you can improve the relationship with that factory. Have a real heart to heart and say, look, these are some things that are really, we appreciate about you, and these are the things we're struggling with. See if you can improve it. So that's my first recommendation. And sometimes it is worth changing. You have to really know that in your own mind that that's a good reason, but understand there's risks.
Yeah, but if you do start a relationship with one and it becomes successful, I'd imagine you could expand that into other lines, other products that are kind of relevant to what they do.
Yes. Yes. So I'm not saying don't do it. I probably sounded like really anti sourcing. I love finding a new factory partner. I'm just saying keep in mind it's really easy to see the grass greener on another side. So just do it with precautions. Maybe stack your inventory, place a PO with that factory and place an earlier PO with the new one to make sure that the product ends up being a success.
Gotcha. I also like what you mentioned about, trying to make their job as easy as possible in working with you, especially in the early stages, because you're right. A lot of brands may be small. Yeah, they're emerging brands. They're just starting, and they have to kind of earn that relationship with them. And then, just like a brand working with a retailer, you want that relationship to grow together and benefit both. It's got to
Right.
benefit both parties.
Mhm.
So, question. Okay, does co-packing hurt your company reputation?
I don't believe that co-packing hurts your reputation. The key is, how are you positioning the co-packing? For example, you've seen things on boxes that say designed in California, manufactured in China. I
Uh,
think you need to tell
Apple.
the story. Right, Apple. You need to tell a story of how you own the IP, you own the concepts, you own the brand. So if you're a brand owner, you need to realize that you are responsible first and foremost for the relationship with that customer that's buying from you. So telling the story of how you're a part of it, making sure things are still brand consistent, having really high standards, being an owner of those relationships in the brand, I think that it can actually be a huge benefit to you because it allows you to have diversity. I think we're all familiar with Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's doesn't own a single factory. Everything is co-packed, but they put so much intentionality in the products that they do that I go there specifically to buy the snacks and like binge on them. So that's a great example of how co-packing can actually help your brand to grow.
Gotcha. Okay, here's one that just came in. My supplier does not take a letter of credit. Is this a bad sign on the part of the factory?
I think it shows that they've been burned before, which doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. So what I wish you could clarify, because a letter of credit can sometimes be a thing from a bank stating a certain amount of money, but you can also get a credit line from the bank, remove the cash and pay them, and the factory doesn't ever know that where the money came from. I have a line of credit for when we do really big productions and people haven't paid us yet, so we need to give them terms. We we have this line of credit. So no, the factory that I work with doesn't count on a line of credit letter from me. They get the cash. So that would be my question to you is, can you perhaps find a different way of going about that?
Gotcha. Why and when should a brand have a backup or secondary manufacturer or packager?
Ooh, dude, this is like risk analysis. I love this stuff. This is like when we're growing, we need more help. I love it. In the beginning, you can't afford to have multiple factories. But as soon as you start getting orders, you realize I need to have diversification. So the two reasons why you should do it is because the quantity of orders is growing and you need to reduce risks. When this is happening, though, you have to go back to all my other slides, reference them, email me, and send me a thank you note because I reminded you of all this stuff. You need to have really clear product spec sheets. You need to know the ingredients. It will really matter between two factories whether you're using the same ingredients. So, and some people will not give you all the information you need to duplicate a product that they just commercialized at a different location. So you have to build a relationship with that factory so that way you have the information to easily share. So the first reason why you should have two factories is because the quantity of orders is growing and your existing factory may have a cap limit. Go back to QA to make sure you do it right. The second reason is because of regional differences. Freight right now is one of the number one things killing profit margins for small and emerging brands. East Coast, West Coast. Long haul trucking goes between the two. If you can make a product on the East Coast and you have enough customers to support sales and manufacture a product on the West Coast of the US or in a different country to support the sales that are over there, that one is the second reason why it's a great idea to do that, because you will save and reduce costs manufacturing locally, shipping locally.
And plus, I just wanted to add to that. I think we all saw over the past couple of years, right? It started from COVID, then you had the shipping problems and all that, where a lot of, I interviewed about a dozen suppliers about how they were dealing with the impacts or the residual effects of inflation, cost increases, all the way up to supply chain, and some of them were in situations where their suppliers actually ran out of raw materials and they had to scramble. And I think more and more people were kind of looking to at least have some sort of backup on hand that they can turn to in case their original supplier ran out of ingredients.
As soon as you said that, it made me also remember, firstly, a topic that I should plug, which is our upcoming webinar next week, which is on 7 ways to increase sales on Amazon without ads, increasing ad spend. And the reason why I bring this up is because Tuka Oksanen, who's teaching it, talked about this issue with me before. And he said, one of the main things that hurts people's overall Amazon performance has to do with not having inventory. And when you just don't have inventory for 2 weeks, it can completely change the organization of the search SEO. And so let's just say after like 2 weeks, you come back in, you're now back here in the list on search. And you got to build your way back all the way back up because they list things based on the number of units being sold. You can lose your ability. You can use months and months and months of sales just by not being in inventory. So you brought up a great point. If there's either ingredient delays or you didn't place a purchase order and plan fast enough, you can lose so much money. Retailers are the same way. They'll kick you out of a store.
Yep.
And never let you back. Never. If it wasn't for the pandemic, for example, or like a national issue, if you just didn't supply and didn't plan well, you can get completely kicked out because you ruined months of their revenue and they don't trust you. They don't trust your professionalism.
We've actually, and I wrote about this too. There was one buyer that I wrote about, and we could share these with everybody in the audience as a follow up, where because one of her suppliers couldn't get a hold of ingredients, they had to substitute another supplier. And then that substitute supplier, which she found at an ECRM session, she ended up loving that supplier so much that the other one was booted out. And that's happened. So it's an example of what you just talked about, and how that can happen because they got to fill those shelves. They don't want empty holes. They don't want holes in their shelves. So they're going to fill it with somebody to make sure you have that steady source of supply. So
right.
But
Well,
unfortunately,
Oh, well, one of the things I was going to mention is that if someone's like got a beauty brand, for example, and they're already manufacturing like a skincare line and they want to test out a new factory, one great way to do it is you go source a new factory and you manufacture a different product at the other factory. You have the brand, the beauty brand, you have the relationships with customers. You can find a new factory to make a new product that allows you to sell new things to an existing customer base. And you have those upcoming events. So people should go attend them.
Excellent. Well, we're out of time. So thank you, everybody. You have Emily's information in the chat if you have additional questions you'd like to follow up with. You also have the information in the chat, and we will send you a follow-up email related to the 2 ECRM sessions on contract manufacturing. So this way you don't have to, scramble to look through the chat and get that info. So again, thank you, everybody, for joining us. And Emily, thank you for a great presentation. And everybody, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Joe. Bye, everybody.